Chicago Bears offensive coordinator Luke Getsy will get to be one of the head coaches coaching the college football rosters down at the Senior Bowl. It might not sound like a big deal at first, but it's a big advantage for the organization, and it says a lot about Luke Getsy and how he's viewed in the NFL.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Today's episode of Locked On Bears is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. On the show today, we catch up on the Luke Getsy news. We kind of missed from last week while I was gone. I was on vacation overseas in Europe, and getting over to some of the big Bears lingering stories here. And I think this Luke Getsy thing may have slipped under the radar a little bit. And I think it's really important this offseason that Luke Getsy gets to coach the Senior Bowl. We'll talk about the value for the Chicago Bears and why it's important, why it matters at this stage of the offseason. And we'll also ask some questions here about, well, why is Luke Getsy getting to coach this? And what does that say about him and about this process and why it's a pretty strong reflection here, and to really think about why him and not other people that you might think of being higher on that list or a higher priority to get that opportunity. And we'll wrap up looking at just briefly an overview of the players that will be available and how that can be an advantage to the Bears and the types of prospects Luke Getsy will get that up close and personal evaluation of. Because that, first and foremost, is the real value here, that the Bears will have their offensive coordinator overseeing one of the rosters of this team, that he will get to be right there coaching them hands-on to be a part of, seeing their development, getting to know them as players, getting to scout them personally, one-on-one, and from a collective team side. And that's going to be some access that 32 or 31 other teams are not going to have, right? I mean, the other teams are going to have members of their coaching staffs on his Senior Bowl staff. It's not the entire Bears coaching staff that will be coaching under Luke Getsy. It's kind of a complicated thing, and we'll get into a little bit of the why and the how of how this starts to work out here. But he will be coaching one of the two teams, the American team, on behalf of that. And so every single player on that roster, including how many Alabama players? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different Alabama prospects. I mean, the way that they're split up, is a little bit more geographically, but some guys from TCU, some guys from Oklahoma in there, LSU, Florida, Auburn, like big time college football program prospects. The Bears offensive coordinator will get more exposure and one-on-one time with than any other team overall with him in that head coaching role. And that's super, super valuable for a Bears team and a Bears front office and a Bears coaching staff that put a lot of stock into what players did at the Senior Bowl last season, that we heard and we talked about it on this podcast a year ago after the draft, how they raved about what certain guys had been able to do with their time at these college football all-star games. Guys like Braxton Jones coming and playing really well, guys like Dominique Robinson coming to the Senior Bowl and really flashing as an inexperienced player there with a lot of upside and skill. And a lot of these offensive linemen, Zachary Thomas, and I think Doug Kramer might have been in that process as well. A lot of these guys they got to be in these college football all-star games, and namely the Senior Bowl being the biggest one. Velus Jones, I believe, was there as well, and I really liked what we saw from Velus Jones last year. The Bears put a lot of stock into this, and that was with them just watching from the sidelines, watching the same amount that every other team gets. Now Luke Getsy gets to be one step closer. And sure, as the offensive coordinator, maybe he won't have as much to say about the defensive players. He'll certainly be around them and can get to know them as human beings, especially, and kind of get to better know how they tick, because the Bears are putting that really strong emphasis on getting the right people, players that are motivated the right way, guys that they feel like fit their culture and will, follow along the HITS principle and be motivated in the ways they want. That's one of the ways that Luke Getsy can have an influence when it comes to these defensive players, in addition to obviously the offensive coordinator getting to work with some very talented offensive players on his roster as well, and go to his coaching staff and his front office and have a very even more refined evaluation of what those players will be beyond everything that the scouts will be scouting and the general manager and the interviews and the pre-draft process and the combine and all that stuff. It's another added layer in a part of the process that the Bears have already clearly showed a high value in for themselves. And so I think it's a great opportunity. And I'm a little biased because I will be down there for the Senior Bowl, and it's nice to be able to have the Bears offensive coordinator running one of the teams to give us extra things to talk about while we're there and make the process that much more important for us to be there along the way there. Even if he's the only Bears coach that is in a prominent role on that staff, it is still a big thing for him, for this front office, for this organization. And I'm excited to see how it comes together for them down there and how we see that affect what they ultimately end up doing in the NFL draft as a result of that added exposure from Luke Getsy. But it's also a bigger exposure for Luke Getsy, not in terms of exposure to the players, but exposure to other coaches and to the NFL. And it's interesting that Luke Getsy got this opportunity over any other set of coaches that could have had that role. And we'll explain why this seems like a really strong indication of how he's viewed and the trajectory he is on in his coaching career next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the better way to do daily fantasy sports because PrizePicks puts you in complete control. Unlike some of the other daily fantasy platforms, right? You pick in your lineup and other people are picking their lineups, and whoever's lineups are better wins. So whether you win or lose will depend on what other people are doing with their lineups. None of that at PrizePicks. With PrizePicks, it's you versus the projections available. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, and then you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. Really makes these playoff games that much more fun as we get closer and closer to the big one. But not just football, but across all of sports, they have it at PrizePicks. And it's really easy to enter. It really literally takes 60 seconds or less. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100 extra dollars. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you a bonus $50. Just don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at signup for an instant deposit match up to $100. It struck me as surprising, but cool and encouraging that Luke Getsy got this opportunity to coach the American team down at the Senior Bowl. But it made me take a step back and think about why. Why did Luke Getsy get this opportunity? So a peek behind the curtains here. I don't know how much of this has been reported and how much of this is, maybe I'm saying more than I'm supposed to be saying, but I know people involved with some of the college football all-star games, the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine game and the NFL PA Bowl and all that. And there's a lot of behind-the-scenes politics that goes on with those games and everything. But this year, the East-West Shrine game in Vegas, which is happening at the same time as the Senior Bowl, they got to pick full coaching staffs that they get to be like a team or 2 teams get to come in and have their entire coaching staffs essentially, run those teams as though they get to have, their head coach and their coordinators and their position coaches get to handle that. I think it's the New England Patriots and Atlanta Falcons coaching staffs are running the East and the West teams in the East-West Shrine game. And so the Senior Bowl then doesn't get to do full team coaching staffs. They just have to pick other coaches to kind of form these pseudo staffs running their game. And in the past, it has always been Senior Bowl always gets full staffs. Because a couple of years ago, the Bears coached it with, was that under John Fox? I think about probably 5 years ago now when we were down there, when John Fox was coaching the Senior Bowl team down there for the Bears. And a couple years ago it was the Browns. You get the whole rosters, and every year it's been NFL teams, coaching staffs always do the Senior Bowl, and the East-West Shrine game has always just been sort of like miscellaneous coaches will come in and coach those games. I don't know exactly why, but for some reason this year, the East-West Shrine game got the standing to be able to get the coaches this time. And I think the plan is that they're going to alternate every other year. I think is what my understanding is, that next year the Senior Bowl will get full NFL coaching staffs, and the East-West Shrine game will get the sort of partial, build your own staff thing that the Senior Bowl is doing this year. And so with the Shrine game having the Patriots and the Falcons, the Senior Bowl says, okay, we're going to give coaches an opportunity to come coach this game without it being their full teams. I believe the Senior Bowl asked teams to submit their recommendations for which coaches on their staff they would like to see coach at the Senior Bowl. Which guys do you want to promote to us that then we can select from to coach in this game? And so it strikes me quite a bit that Luke Getsy was selected for that opportunity. It's not surprising that the Bears nominated him and suggested him as a coach who would be good in that potential role. But the fact that he got the opportunity over everyone else seems to reflect quite a bit on Getsy himself. I find myself doing the Brian Windhorst meme, leaning back with my fingers up, why is that? Why is it that Luke Getsy got to coach in the Senior Bowl this year over somebody else? Because if you think about it, right, we've talked about Getsy as a guy who maybe could be on the long-term track to a head coaching gig, successful in Green Bay, comes to Chicago, and if he can get the offense rolling here, young, innovative offensive coordinator who has worked under multiple different offensive systems before and seems to have a good head on his shoulders and know how to run an offense. And Bears have the number one rushing offense in the NFL, and we're scoring 30 points a game when they were healthy for a stretch there in the middle of the season, right? We've talked about this trajectory, kind of an optimistic trajectory that maybe he could be a future head coaching candidate, but he's not there yet. And so it just strikes me that he's kind of skipping the line a little bit here, right? You might think other guys who are a little bit more ahead of him in that rising star coaching name, right? Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator of Dallas Cowboys, is a guy that's been rumored on that trajectory for a while now. And, he's not actively interviewing for head coaching jobs right now. And I guess the Cowboys didn't get eliminated until just now, so maybe they wanted to make sure they had coaches that were going to be available and not in the Super Bowl that week. But I think, Eric Bieniemy from the Kansas City Chiefs, Mike Kafka, the Giants offensive coordinator now, who was with the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a lot of these coaches that are rising stars that are either getting head coaching interviews or getting close to getting head coaching interviews. Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions in there. Plus, I'm just naming offensive coaches because, the comparison point for Luke Getsy, but defensive coaches as well. The other head coach at the Senior Bowl is Patrick Graham, who right now is the Las Vegas Raiders defensive coordinator. And he's been a guy who has been kind of one of these up-and-coming defensive coaches. He was the Dolphins defensive coordinator. I think he was the Giants defensive coordinator for a few years. He'd been in some of these head coaching discussions as a trajectory type guy. He was a Patriots defensive assistant for a long time when those defenses were so good. He's been around the block, and he's a name that people seem to know pretty well around the NFL that way. And it strikes me that Luke Getsy is being elevated into that conversation ahead of a bunch of other people. When you look at an event like this, it's now an opportunity for everyone to see what Luke Getsy does in a head coaching role. Not just coordinating an offense, but coordinating a team, needing to be that CEO type, showing how he might run an organization, how he might run a practice, how he sets the tone, what kind of leader he is across an entire roster. Not just a play caller, not just a position coach, but a head coach overseeing all aspects of an organization. It's also a super coach networking event because it's a bunch of coaches on his staff that he does not normally coach with. It's coaches from across the NFL and some free agent coaches, I think, as well, that all of a sudden he has a chance to work with directly for a week so that if, down the line he has to build a coaching staff of his own or goes to another team and needs more assistance, right? He now has some experience with these people and adds more people to his coaching network there that he can pull through, right? It just feels like this is sort of like a business networking event, like an accelerator, right? Like you go there, you go to this and you get this opportunity and everyone gets to see what you could do as like a head coaching prep opportunity. And the fact that he got it over so many other coaches, him and Patrick Graham got to be the head guys. One thing if he's just one of the assistants filling in. A bunch of teams got a bunch of assistants filling in, you'd go be the Senior Bowl wide receivers coach. Cool, great. That's a great opportunity and it's good for scouting those players, sure. But to be the head guy running one of these rosters, I think is a reflection of the league seeing him as a future head coach candidate. The league seeing him as a guy like, hey, we need to keep an eye on him and we need to give him these opportunities to grow because we really think he might be able to be something and be on that fast track. And the Bears haven't really had that, certainly not in an offensive coordinator ever. Adam Gase became a head coach twice, Dolphins and then Jets. But he was in Chicago for 1 year and was kind of already that coming in and wasn't a successful head coach. And I don't know if you count Adam Gase as being exactly that. It's probably the closest thing we've seen in my lifetime, certainly as a person covering this Bears team. I'm sure the more experienced Bears fans with more history behind them can point to other coaches in the past that's before my lifetime. But an offensive coach that's at the forefront. And not only that's not just us looking at this offense and Fields and saying like, okay, he's doing a pretty good job of making some things happen with Fields, but it's the rest of the NFL agreeing and saying like, yep, we want to give Luke Getsy these opportunities. It's a pretty cool thing. I don't know that we're like a year away from Luke Getsy leaving. If the Bears do a Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Hurts level ascension next year, maybe that conversation heats up a little bit. It feels maybe more like 2 years before that really becomes a big thing, and that's another conversation for another time. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and say, yep, see, Luke Getsy is going to be head coach next year or the year after, and the Bears are going to need a new offensive coordinator. Like, that's the optimist view. That's maybe even I don't want to call it ideal because you don't want to lose Luke Getsy, but it's ideal for him is that kind of trajectory. But it's another sign of a step in the right direction and a vote of confidence in the guy the Bears have as their offensive coordinator to build the offense around Justin Fields, develop Justin Fields, and get this offense really rolling as best as it possibly can in 2023. Now, Senior Bowl is going to be a great opportunity for him, like we said, to scout some of these Senior Bowl players. So we're going to go through some of the names, some of the position strength, really kind of, broad overview. We're not doing in-depth deep dives here on Senior Bowl prospects, but to get a sense of what Luke Getsy is going to be working with here next on Locked On Bears. This episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for the Locked On Podcast Network because they're the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better because they have so many great features that can make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers can join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You just sign up at FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads and player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a bigger chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay, especially in these playoff games, man. You can throw a little money down and have some real stakes instead of just watching from afar, wishing the Bears were the teams playing in these games. And it's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Of course, sports gambling perfectly works fine for FanDuel and is legal in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, across the Midwest here, pretty much everywhere but Wisconsin and I think Minnesota are the main Midwest ones that still don't have it. So no matter where you are, football fans, you're not going to miss out here. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So this Senior Bowl roster, it's not, you're not going to see Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, the two number one overall pick level prospects that the Bears have been linked to. they're not going to be Senior Bowl players. You don't get that top guys. The guys that are guaranteed top 5 picks don't have anything to prove at the Senior Bowl. So you're not going to get that level of talent, but there's still some really great players here. And we've seen the Bears value what they see from these players in these games. And I think it's kind of a good time to kind of take stock of what things are looking like for Luke Getsy at this game, given the hands-on approach that the Bears are going to be able to take with this. And so when I look at this Senior Bowl roster from a big picture standpoint, I've not done deep dives into very many of these players. I don't have scouting reports to be able to give you on all of these guys, right? That's not the goal of what we're doing right now, but to kind of get a sense of like, okay, where is the strengths and weaknesses of this group? And there are a lot of really, really talented pass rushers down here at the Senior Bowl. It's a group of guys that have shown some production and shown some a kind of a variety of skill sets. Like Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame, Derek Hall from Auburn, Ohio State, Zach Harrison, even Andre Carter from Army, the guy who they had to Congress had to change a bill to make an exception for him to be able to go to the NFL and not have to do his service time. And there's a bunch of different guys in this draft process that are going to be at the Senior Bowl that can give the Bears a really close and personal look at a really high position of need. Obviously, free agency is going to determine some of this, but you're still going to need more pass rushers. You can never have too many pass rushers, and take more young pass rushers. Absolutely. Also, a pretty good offensive tackle group going up against those pass rushers. There's even the small school kid from North Dakota State, or regular North Dakota. I think it's North Dakota State. The Cody Mouch is the guy who looks like a lumberjack and has got the missing teeth that always keeps going viral on Twitter anytime there's a game that he's in. North Dakota State offense. He's missing his 2 front teeth that got knocked out during a basketball game. He just looks like a lumberjack and like a Viking, like a Game of Thrones character. And he's going to be fun to see how he goes up against some of this top pass rushing talent. But there's a bunch of different good offensive tackles where the Bears drafted a handful of them from the Senior Bowl last year. Michigan's got a couple guys there. I think USC too. I mean, there's some really good offensive line talent there to match up with the pass rushers. And in the trenches is definitely where we're going to be paying a lot of our attention when we're down at the Senior Bowl. Boy, just next week, it's already around the corner. Because it's not a very strong group at wide receiver. I don't think you're seeing first-round talent guys there and some borderline second-round guys. You're not going to get your number 1 wide receiver down at the Senior Bowl, which is a little bit disappointing, but it's just the nature of how the class goes. And there's already been some debate about how good this wide receiver class is in general, that there might not be a ton of early first-round pick guys and where they might go in the league being a little bit more split on where some of that talent is, but at least some really good running backs down at the Senior Bowl. There always tends to be, but it seems like this class in particular is really going to be a strong group. And we saw some pretty good ones last year too with Brian Robinson from Alabama and Damian Pierce from Florida and a couple other guys there. And with David Montgomery as a free agent, we'll know by the draft day what the Bears need is at running back. But there's a conversation I think we need to have this offseason on the podcast at some point. I'm planning to, about how I think this Bears offense could use a better passing game weapon at running back and some of the different options there. And Tristan Ebner hasn't looked like that, but I think he was kind of supposed to be some of that, and certainly not going to keep you from drafting another running back. And Luke Getsy is going to get a good look at this running back class down there in Mobile as well. So I'm excited for what he's going to be able to see and what the Bears end up drafting out of this Senior Bowl group, because I would bet good money they draft at least 1 Senior Bowl player, if not a handful of Senior Bowl players, like they did last year, especially if they trade down from number 1 and get some extra picks in there. It's a lot more ammo to be able to take more of these guys. So, like I said, next week we will be in Mobile. It's not going to stop the podcast. We'll still be here for you every single day, bringing you that daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. So make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast or on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. That way you're keeping up with everything we're putting out for you. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every single day. If you're looking for your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On NFL, the rotating cast of our Locked On Podcast Network hosts, covering the league from the league-wide perspective. A lot of playoff talk, a lot of head coaching search talk, a lot of coaching staff changes across the league. So go check out Locked On NFL for more of your football coverage. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears, and of course, another opportunity to bear down.